My son-in-law said I didn't deserve a single cent from my wife's $75 million inheritance. He sat back in his chair, adjusted his suit, and said, "You're already old. Let me take care of the family." But minutes later, the lawyer showed a document and burst out laughing. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought that losing my wife would be the second most devastating thing to happen to me that day." Eleanor had been gone for 3 weeks when the lawyer called. "Mr. Edwardson," he said in that formal tone lawyers use, "we need to schedule the reading of your wife's will. Are you available this Thursday at 2:00?" I sat in my empty kitchen staring at Eleanor's coffee mug still sitting by the sink. I hadn't had the heart to wash it yet. "Of course," I managed to say, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. The law office smelled like old leather and fresh coffee. I arrived early as I always did and took a seat in the mahogany-paneled conference room. The chair felt too big for me like everything else had since Eleanor passed. At 65, I'd spent the last 42 years of my life as half of a whole. Now I was just me. My daughter Olivia walked in first, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She gave me a tight smile and a brief hug that felt more obligatory than comforting. "Hi, Dad. How are you holding up? Are you—" "I'm managing," I said, though we both knew that was a lie. Then Victor entered and the entire atmosphere shifted. My son-in-law had always been ambitious. That's the polite way Eleanor used to put it. At 38, he carried himself like a man who owned the world and was just waiting for the paperwork to make it official. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. And his smile had that practiced quality of someone who spent their days in boardrooms. "Edward," he said, extending his hand in a firm shake that lasted just a beat too long. Difficult time for all of us. There was something in his tone that made my stomach clench. Not grief, not sympathy, something else entirely. Olivia looked nervous as she fidgeted with her purse strap. "Victor, maybe we should." "It's fine, sweetheart," Victor interrupted, settling into the chair across from me with the confidence of a man claiming his territory. "We're all family here." The lawyer, Mr. Cartwright, entered with a thick folder and reading glasses perched on his nose. He'd been Eleanor's attorney for 20 years, and I could see something in his expression I couldn't quite identify. Amusement. "No, that couldn't be right." "Thank you all for coming." Cartwright began opening the folder with deliberate slowness. Eleanor Beaumont's last will and testament is quite comprehensive. She was very specific about her wishes. I gripped the arms of my chair. Eleanor had been worth $75 million. Most people didn't know that about my quiet, gentle wife. She'd inherited a fortune from her grandfather's shipping business and had invested wisely over the decades. We'd lived modestly, never flaunting our wealth, but I knew that money would change everything for our family. The primary estate, valued at approximately $75 million, Cartwright continued, has been divided as follows. Victor leaned forward, his eyes sharp with anticipation. I noticed Olivia glance between her husband and me, worry creasing her forehead. "To my beloved daughter Olivia, I leave the sum of $4 million along with my jewelry collection and the family photographs." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Mom was always so generous. "To my dear husband, Edward Cartwright," continued, and I held my breath. "I leave our home, my personal belongings, and the sum of $2 million. My heart sank. $2 million was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But out of $75 million, it felt like a slap across the face. Eleanor thought so little of our marriage, of our 42 years together. Victor couldn't hide his grin. He actually rubbed his hands together like a cartoon villain, and the remaining $69 million. Cartwright paused, looking directly at Victor with those amused eyes. "The remaining estate is to be held in trust with management decisions to be made by the primary trustee." "Excellent," Victor said, straightening his tie. "When do I assume control?" The silence in the room was deafening. Cartwright's smile widened just slightly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Victor, but you're not the trustee." Victor blinked. "What do you mean Olivia is Eleanor's only child as her husband?" "I naturally the primary trustee." Cartwright interrupted, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. "Is Edward Beaumont?" I felt like someone had dumped ice water over my head. "I'm sorry." What Victor shot up from his chair so fast it nearly toppled backward. That's impossible. Edward is 65 years old. He has no business experience, no financial background. This has to be a mistake. Cartwright calmly flipped to another page. Eleanor was very clear in her instructions. She felt that Edward's judgment and character made him the ideal person to oversee the family's financial future. This is ridiculous. Victor sputtered, his face turning red. You're already old, Edward. You should be thinking about retirement, not managing millions of dollars. Let me handle the family finances. I have an MBA from Yale, 20 years of investment experience. Eleanor's decision is final, Cartwright said firmly. Victor began pacing, his composure completely shattered. This is insane. Edward probably doesn't even know how to use online banking. What happens when he makes a mistake? When he loses everything because he doesn't understand modern finance? I sat there stunned as my son-in-law ranted about my inadequacies. Each word felt like a physical blow. He wasn't wrong. I was just a retired high school teacher who'd spent his career trying to get teenagers to care about American history. What did I know about managing that kind of money? There's more, Cartwright said quietly, and something in his tone made everyone freeze. Victor stopped pacing. Olivia looked up from her tissues. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Cartwright reached into his folder and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in Eleanor's familiar handwriting. Eleanor left specific instructions that this letter be given to Edward immediately following the reading of the will. My hands shook as I took the envelope. Eleanor's perfume still lingered on the paper. Lavender and vanilla, the scent that had welcomed me home every day for 4 decades. Should I read this now? I asked. That's entirely up to you, Cartwright said. But there was something in his eyes that suggested he knew exactly what the letter contained. Victor had gone very still, watching me with the intensity of a predator. Olivia reached over and squeezed my hand. Dad, whatever it says, we'll figure it out together. But even as she spoke those words, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the doubt about whether her old father could really handle such an enormous responsibility. I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers, and as I began to read Eleanor's familiar handwriting, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This wasn't just a letter of comfort from my deceased wife. This was a battle plan. And suddenly I understood why Cartwright had been smiling. My dearest Edward, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And Victor has just shown his true colors exactly as I predicted he would. I'm sorry you had to witness his reaction, but I needed you to see what I've been seeing for years. My hands trembled as I read Eleanor's words in the lawyer's office. Victor was hovering behind me, trying to read over my shoulder, but I instinctively clutched the letter closer to my chest. Don't read this in front of them. The letter continued as if Eleanor could see into the future. Tell them you need time to process everything. Go home. Look in my jewelry box behind the false back panel. There are more letters waiting for you there. Trust me, my love. I've been preparing for this moment longer than you know. I looked up to find 3 pairs of eyes staring at me expectantly. Cartwright's expression remained neutral, but I caught that same hint of amusement dancing in his eyes. Olivia looked worried, her hands twisted in her lap. Victor looked like he wanted to snatch the letter from my hands. Well, Victor demanded, what does it say? I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. She wanted me to know that she believed in me, that she trusted me to do what's right for the family. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Something in Eleanor's letter had sent a chill down my spine, but also sparked something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or determination. Dad, Olivia said gently, are you sure you're up for this? Managing that much money, it's a huge responsibility. Maybe Victor could help. I can handle it, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Victor stepped forward, and I could see him struggling to maintain his composure. Edward, be reasonable. You're grieving. You're overwhelmed. Why don't you sign a power of attorney giving me temporary control, just until you're feeling more like yourself? The suggestion made my skin crawl, though I couldn't say exactly why. I think I need some time to process all of this, Mr. Cartwright. When can we meet again to discuss the details? Whenever you're ready. Edward, the trust documents are quite specific about the transition timeline. You have as much time as you need. Victor's jaw tightened. Time we don't have. Markets are volatile right now. Every day of delay could cost us thousands. And it's a good thing it's not your decision to make, I said quietly. The ride home was silent. Olivia had offered to drive me, but Victor insisted they take their own car. I was grateful for the solitude. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Eleanor had left me in charge of $69 million. Me, a man who still balanced his checkbook with a pencil and paper. But there was something else. Something in Eleanor's letter that suggested this was all part of a larger plan. What had she seen in Victor that I'd missed? What had she been preparing for? Our house felt even emptier when I walked through the front door. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I stood in our bedroom doorway for a long moment, looking at Eleanor's jewelry box sitting on her vanity table. She'd had that box for as long as I'd known her. A mahogany antique with tiny drawers and hidden compartments. I'd always assumed the compartments were just decorative. Apparently, I'd been wrong about a lot of things. My fingers found the catch behind the main compartment just as Eleanor had described. The false back panel slid away easily, revealing a small space I'd never known existed. Inside were 5 more envelopes, each one labeled with a date spanning the last 3 years. Open these in order. Read a note attached to the first envelope. And Edward, pour yourself a scotch first. You're going to need it. I did as she suggested, settling into my reading chair with a generous pour of the Lagavulin she'd given me for my 60th birthday. The first envelope was dated 3 years ago, just after Victor and Olivia's wedding. My darling Edward. I'm writing this the day after our daughter's wedding, and my heart is heavy. I watched Victor today, really watched him, and I saw something that terrified me. The way he looked at our family, at our life, at our wealth. It wasn't love or gratitude, it was calculation. Do you remember when Olivia first brought him home? How charming he was, how interested he seemed in our stories, our history. I thought it was sweet then. Now I realize he was gathering intelligence. I sat down the letter, my stomach churning. Victor had been charming during those early visits. He'd asked endless questions about Eleanor's family history, about her grandfather's business, about our investments. We'd thought he was just trying to fit in to understand the family he was marrying into. I started paying closer attention after the wedding. Eleanor's letter continued. The questions became more specific. How much was the house worth? What were our monthly expenses? Did we have life insurance? He was always careful to ask Olivia these questions when he thought I wasn't listening. But our house has thin walls, and I've always been a light sleeper. Then came the comments about your age, your health, how you should slow down, take things easier, how it might be wise to get our affairs in order. Always presented as concern. Always delivered with that practiced smile. Edward, sorry, I need you to understand something. Victor doesn't love our daughter. He loves what she represents, access to our family's wealth. And he's been waiting for one of us to die so he can claim what he thinks is rightfully his. My hands were shaking again. I thought back to recent family dinners, to Victor's seemingly innocent comments about retirement planning and estate preparation, his suggestions that I should take it easy and let the younger generation handle the complex decisions. The second envelope was dated 2 years ago. I hired a private investigator, Eleanor wrote, and I nearly choked on my scotch. I know that sounds paranoid, but I had to know if my suspicions were justified. What I discovered broke my heart. Victor has been systematically researching our finances for years. He knows about every account, every investment, every asset we own. He's been building relationships with our financial advisors, presenting himself as the family's future decision maker. He even met with our accountant last month to discuss tax optimization strategies for when he inherits. But the worst part, Edward, is what he's been saying about you. The investigator recorded several conversations Victor had with his business associates. He's been telling people that you're developing early signs of dementia, that you're becoming forgetful and confused, that the family is concerned about your ability to make important decisions. None of it is true. Of course you're as sharp as you've ever been, but Victor is building a narrative, creating documentation of your supposed decline so that when the time comes he can challenge any decisions you make about our estate. I had to set the letter down and walk to the window. The evening light was fading, casting long shadows across our backyard, where Eleanor and I had spent countless hours gardening together. The roses she'd planted were still blooming as if they didn't know she was gone. Victor had been planning this for years. While I'd been treating him like a son, he'd been treating me like an obstacle to overcome. The third envelope contained copies of documents I'd never seen before. Legal papers, medical consultations, even a letter from Victor to a probate attorney discussing the possibility of challenging a will on grounds of mental incompetence. Eleanor hadn't just discovered Victor's plan. She'd been documenting it, building her own case, preparing for war. The fourth envelope was the most devastating. I confronted Olivia yesterday, Eleanor wrote, and the pain in her words was almost unbearable. I showed her some of the evidence, hoping she would see what I was seeing. But Victor has been working on her too, Edward. He's convinced her that we're getting old, that we need more help managing our affairs, that it would be a kindness for the younger generation to take over. She doesn't see his manipulation because she loves him. And because she loves him, she's become complicit in his plan without even realizing it. When I showed her the evidence, she accused me of being paranoid and controlling. She said I was trying to drive a wedge between her and her husband. I realized then that I couldn't save our daughter from her own choices, but I could save you from becoming her victim. The final envelope contained a detailed plan, not just financial instructions, but a psychological profile of Victor, predictions about how he would react to different scenarios and strategies for staying one step ahead of his manipulations. Victor expects you to be weak, Eleanor concluded. He's counting on your grief, your self-doubt, your natural inclination to trust family. He thinks that if he applies enough pressure, you'll cave and give him what he wants. But I know something he doesn't. I know the man I married. I know your strength, your intelligence, your stubborn streak that drove me crazy for 42 wonderful years. You're going to surprise him, Edward. You're going to surprise them all. I've given you every tool you need to protect yourself in our legacy. The question now is, are you ready to use them? All my love, always and forever. Eleanor. P.S. Check the safe behind my portrait in the study. The combination is our wedding anniversary. You'll find some additional insurance there. I sat in my chair as darkness fell around me, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's final gift to me. She'd known she was dying. The doctor had told us her heart condition was worsening, but instead of spending her last months in despair, she'd spent them protecting me. The grief hit me anew, but this time it was mixed with something else. Rage. Not just at Victor, but at myself for being so blind. Eleanor had seen the truth about our son-in-law while I'd been playing the role of the trusting father-in-law. I made my way to the study and found the safe exactly where Eleanor had said it would be. Inside were bank statements, recorded conversations, legal documents, and a thick folder labeled for Edward's protection. My wife had built me an arsenal, and tomorrow Victor was going to discover that the grieving old widower hour he'd been planning to manipulate was going to fight back. I slept better that night than I had since Eleanor's funeral. For the first time in weeks, I had a purpose beyond just surviving each day. I woke up at 6, made coffee the way Eleanor had taught me, and spread her files across the kitchen table like a general planning a campaign. Eleanor's instructions were thorough. She'd anticipated Victor every move, predicted his strategies, even provided scripts for conversations I might need to have. But what struck me most was how well she'd known him. Every psychological insight, every behavioral prediction. It was like reading a manual for dealing with a particularly dangerous species of predator. The first phase of her plan was simple: appear weak while gathering strength. Victor called it 9 sharp. I let it ring 4 times before answering, injecting just the right amount of confusion into my voice. Hello, Edward. It's Victor. I hope you slept well. I know yesterday was overwhelming for everyone. His tone was different now, softer, more concerned. According to Eleanor's notes, this would be his opening move, positioning himself as the caring son-in-law, the voice of reason in a difficult time. Oh, Victor. Yes, it was a lot to process. I can imagine. Listen, I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, and I want you to know that Olivia and I are here to help. Managing that kind of money is a huge responsibility, and you shouldn't have to face it alone. There it was, right on schedule. I appreciate that, I said, adding a slight tremor to my voice. I have to admit I'm feeling a bit out of my depth. I could practically hear his smile through the phone. That's completely understandable. Why don't we meet for lunch today, just the two of us? I can walk you through some basic investment principles. Help you understand what you're dealing with. Eleanor's notes warned me about this. Victor would want to isolate me, get me away from any potential advisors or witnesses. He'd use the lunch to assess my vulnerabilities and begin his psychological manipulation. That sounds like a good idea. Where should we meet? How about the club? It's quiet there, Private. We can talk without interruptions. The club, of course. Victor loved flashing his membership at the exclusive country club downtown. Eleanor had predicted this too. He'd want to meet somewhere that reinforced his image as the successful businessman. Somewhere that would make me feel small and out of place. All right, what time, noon? And Edward, don't worry about any of this. We're family. I'll take good care of everything. After hanging up, I called Cartwright. Eleanor had instructed me to keep him informed of every interaction with Victor. The lawyer answered on the first ring. Edward, how are you holding up? Better than expected. Victor wants to meet for lunch today. He's already positioning himself as my advisor. Cartwright chuckled. Eleanor said he wouldn't wait long. Are you ready for this? I think so. She left very detailed instructions. Good. Remember, you're not just following her plan. You're honoring her final wishes. She wanted to protect you, and she wanted the truth about Victor to come to light. I spent the morning reviewing Eleanor's psychological profile of my son-in-law. She'd identified his key weaknesses, his need to appear superior, his tendency to underestimate people he considered beneath him, and his fatal flaw of talking too much when he thought he was winning. The club's dining room was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected. Dark wood paneling oil paintings of dead rich men and waiters who moved with the silent efficiency of well-trained servants. Victor was already seated at a corner table checking his phone with the air of a man whose time was extremely valuable. Edward. He stood to shake my hand, gripping it just a little too firmly, holding it just a little too long. You look tired. Are you sleeping not well? I admitted, which was partially true. Everything feels different now. Victor guided me to my seat with a hand on my shoulder, the gesture somewhere between paternal and condescending. That's completely normal. Grief affects everyone differently. The important thing is that you don't make any major decisions while you're in this state. We ordered lunch. I chose the simplest thing on the menu. Playing the role of the overwhelmed widower, Victor ordered wine for both of us, despite the fact that it wasn't even noon yet. So he said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man who thought he was in complete control. Let's talk about your situation. $69 million is serious money, Edward. It requires serious expertise to manage properly. I nodded, taking a sip of wine I didn't want. I keep thinking there must be some mistake. Eleanor always handled our finances. I don't even know where to start. That's exactly my point. Victor pulled out a leather portfolio and spread several documents across the table. I've been doing some preliminary research into Eleanor's investment portfolio. There are some concerning trends here. The documents were impressive. Detailed financial analyses, market projections, risk assessments. Victor had clearly spent considerable time preparing for this conversation. What he didn't know was that Eleanor had provided me with copies of these same documents weeks ago, along with annotations explaining how Victor was manipulating the data to support his narrative. This is all very complicated, I said, studying the papers with a confused expression. It is, but that's why you need professional help. Look at this. He pointed to a graph showing declining returns over the past 6 months. Eleanor's portfolio has been underperforming the market. Without proper management, you could lose millions. According to Eleanor's notes, this was a lie. The portfolio had been deliberately restructured to appear less profitable on paper while actually increasing in value through tax-sheltered investments. It was a sophisticated strategy that Victor either didn't understand or was choosing to ignore. What do you think I should do? I asked. Victor leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. I think you should seriously consider transferring management of the trust to someone with the expertise to handle it properly. Someone who understands modern finance, who can navigate complex investment strategies. You mean you? I mean someone qualified. Yes, Edward. I don't want to see you lose everything Eleanor worked so hard to build. This isn't about me. It's about protecting your family's future. The wine was making him bold, loosening his tongue exactly as Eleanor had predicted. I maintained my confused, slightly overwhelmed expression while making mental notes of everything he said. The way I see it, Victor continued, you have two options. You can try to manage this yourself and risk catastrophic losses, or you can admit that you're in over your head and let someone qualified take the reins. But the will specifically named me as trustee. Victor waved his hand dismissively. Wills can be challenged, especially when there are questions about the deceased's mental state. At the time of writing, Eleanor was on a lot of medication toward the end. Painkillers can affect judgment. There it was, the first direct threat. Eleanor had warned me this would come, but hearing it still sent a chill down my spine. You're saying Eleanor wasn't thinking clearly when she wrote her will? I'm saying she was sick. Edward, dying people don't always make the best financial decisions. The important thing is doing what's best for the family now. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as Victor grew more confident with each passing second. He thought he was winning. He thought I was cracking under pressure. What would you need from me? I asked finally. His smile was triumphant, just a simple power of attorney. Nothing complicated. It would give me temporary authority to make investment decisions while you're grieving. We could review the arrangement in a year or two when you're feeling more like yourself. A year or two. By then, according to Eleanor's analysis, Victor would have consolidated control of the entire fortune. He'd use legal technicalities and my supposed mental decline to make the arrangement permanent. I suppose that makes sense, I said slowly. Victor reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. I took the liberty of having my lawyer draft something. Nothing official, just a framework we can build on. I stared at the papers, pretending to read while actually noting every detail for later discussion with Cartwright. Eleanor had been right about everything so far. Victor was moving fast, trying to secure legal control before I had time to think clearly or consult other advisors. This is a lot to consider, I said, setting the document aside. Of course it is, but Edward, time is a factor here. Every day that portfolio goes unmanaged is money lost. I'd like to get this signed today if possible. The pressure was increasing just as Eleanor had predicted. I could see the calculation in Victor's eyes, the predator sensing weakness in his prey. I need to think about it. This is all happening so fast. Victor's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Edward, I understand you're overwhelmed, but Eleanor's estate won't wait for you to feel ready. Markets don't care about grief. If you truly loved your wife, you'll protect what she built. Using Eleanor's memory as emotional blackmail, Eleanor had warned me about this too. She'd written, when he gets desperate, he'll try to make you feel guilty for not trusting him. He'll use my name, my memory to manipulate you. Don't let him. I stood up slowly, gathering the documents. You're right. Eleanor did work hard for this money. That's exactly why I need to be careful about what I do with it. For the first time since we'd sat down, Victor looked uncertain. What do you mean? I'm going to take some time to review all of this properly. Maybe get a second opinion. Eleanor would have wanted me to be thorough. Victor's jaw tightened. Edward, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I'm trying to help you here. I know you are, I said, adding just enough doubt to my voice to keep him guessing. And I appreciate it, but this is a big decision. I left him sitting at the table with his wine and his frustrated ambitions. As I walked through the club's ornate lobby, I could feel his eyes boring into my back. The first round was over, and while he might think he'd planted seeds of doubt and dependency, what he'd actually done was reveal the full scope of his intentions. Eleanor had been right about everything. Now it was time to move to phase 2 of her plan. The real game was just beginning. The attack started exactly 72 hours after my lunch with Victor. I was in the garden trying to save Eleanor's roses from an early autumn frost when Olivia's car pulled into the driveway. She moved differently as she walked toward me, her shoulders tense, her expression troubled. This wasn't a social visit. Dad, we need to talk. I set down my pruning shears and dusted the soil from my hands. Of course, sweetheart. How about some coffee? This is serious, Dad. Her voice carried a sharpness I'd rarely heard before. Victor is concerned about some of the decisions you're making. There it was, phase 2 of Eleanor's predicted timeline. When direct manipulation failed, Victor would use Olivia as his weapon. My daughter didn't know she was being used. She genuinely believed she was protecting me. We sat at the kitchen table where Eleanor and I had shared thousands of meals. Olivia's hands were folded tightly in her lap, and she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "What decisions are you talking about?" I asked. "The trust. Dad Victor says you're refusing to get professional help. He's worried you're going to make mistakes that could cost the family everything." I poured coffee for both of us, taking my time. Eleanor's letters had prepared me for this conversation, including specific phrases Olivia would likely use. My daughter was nothing if not predictable when she was stressed. "Did Victor tell you I refused his help?" "He said you walked out of lunch without signing the power of attorney papers." "Dad, he's trying to protect you. Protect all of us." I sat down across from her, studying her face. Olivia looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. Victor was putting pressure on her too, using her love for me as leverage. "Olivia, what exactly has Victor told you about my mental state?" She flinched. He's noticed some things. Forgetfulness, confusion. He thinks the grief might be affecting your judgment more than you realize." My stomach clenched. This was Eleanor's worst fear coming true, that Victor would turn our daughter against me by convincing her I was losing my mind. "What kind of forgetfulness?" "He said you seemed confused about basic financial concepts, that you couldn't follow simple explanations about investment strategies." "Dad, he's worried you might be developing." She trailed off, unable to say the word dementia. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want to believe it, but Victor says it's common in men your age." And with the stress of losing Mom, I reached across the table and took her hand. "Olivia, look at me. Really look at me. Do I seem confused to you right now?" She wiped her eyes with her free hand. "No, but Victor says it comes and goes, that you have good days and bad days." Victor had been thorough. He'd planted seeds of doubt so deep that even my own daughter was questioning my competence. But Eleanor had anticipated this too. She'd prepared me for the possibility that I might temporarily lose Olivia's trust. "What does Victor want me to do? Sign the power of attorney. Let him manage the trust until you're feeling better." "Dad, it's just temporary. Just until what? Until I die. Until Victor decides I'm competent again." Olivia pulled her hand away. "Why are you being so stubborn about this? Victor has an MBA from Yale. He knows what he's doing, and I don't. Dad, you were a high school teacher. You've never managed more than a few thousand at a time. This is $69 million we're talking about." The words stung because they echoed my own insecurities. But Eleanor's voice whispered in my memory, "He'll use your humility against you. He'll make you doubt yourself by listing all the reasons you're not qualified. But you are qualified, Edward. You're qualified because you love our family more than you love money." "You're right," I said quietly. "I was just a teacher, but I was a good teacher, Olivia. I spent 40 years helping young people learn to think critically, to question authority, to make good decisions. Maybe those skills apply to more than just history lessons. This isn't about teaching teenagers about the Revolutionary War, Dad. This is about complex financial instruments, market analysis, investment strategies. It's about trusting the right people," I interrupted. "And I'm not sure Victor is the right person." Olivia's expression hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I had to be careful here. Eleanor had warned me that if I attacked Victor directly, Olivia would defend him instinctively. The key was to plant questions, not make accusations. "Has Victor ever talked to you about what he plans to do with the money?" "He wants to diversify the portfolio, modernize the investment strategy." "Dad, the current allocation is too conservative. We're missing opportunities." She was pairing Victor talking points word for word. I wondered if she even realized it. What kind of opportunities? Real estate development, emerging markets, cryptocurrency. She faltered slightly. "I don't understand all the details, but Victor does. That's the point. And what happens to the money I inherit, the $2 million your mother left me? Well, obviously that would be integrated into the overall portfolio for better management efficiency. Obviously my $2 million would disappear into Victor control along with everything else." "Olivia, do you remember what your mother used to say about the difference between smart and wise?" She blinked, thrown by the change in direction. She said, "Smart people know a lot of facts, but wise people know which facts matter." Your mother was a very wise woman. She knew things about people that took me years to understand. What does that have to do with it? Means I'm going to trust her judgment. She made me the trustee for a reason. Olivia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Dad, you're scaring me. This obsession with what Mom wanted, this refusal to accept help, it's not healthy. I'm not obsessed. I'm being careful. No, you're being paranoid. Victor is family. He loves me. He loves our children. What children? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Olivia froze. What? My heart pounded as I realized what I'd revealed. According to Eleanor's files, Olivia and Victor had been trying to have children for 3 years without success, but Victor had been telling his business associates that they were planning to start a family soon, using the prospect of grandchildren as another way to justify his need for financial control. I just meant, theoretically, future children. But Olivia wasn't buying it. Her face had gone pale. Dad, what do you know about our marriage that I don't... I couldn't answer that question without revealing Eleanor's investigation, but I could see doubt creeping into Olivia's eyes for the first time. I just think you should be careful about letting anyone, even someone you love, make all your decisions for you. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression immediately softened. It's Victor. He's wondering how our conversation went. Of course he was. He'd probably been waiting in the car ready to manage Olivia's emotional state based on how successful her mission had been. Tell him I'm thinking about it, I said. Dad, tell him I need a few more days to review everything. That's not unreasonable, is it? Olivia sighed, typing a response. Almost immediately, her phone rang. She answered without hesitation. Hi, honey. No, he didn't sign anything. I don't know. He says he needs more time. Her voice grew quieter. Victor, I'm still here. No, I don't think that's necessary. Are you sure? She hung up and turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear mixed with determination. Love wearing with duty. Victor is coming over. He wants to talk to you directly now. He's worried about you, Dad. We both are. He thinks maybe you need professional help, not just financial help, medical help. The room felt like it was tilting. Victor was escalating faster than even Eleanor had predicted. He was moving to the nuclear option, having me declared mentally incompetent. Olivia, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not sick. I am not confused. I am not suffering from dementia or any other mental illness. I am a grieving widower trying to honor his wife's wishes while protecting his family's future. Then prove it, she said, tears streaming down her face. Sign the power of attorney. Show us you trust the family. Through the kitchen window, I could see Victor's BMW pulling into the driveway. He wasn't alone. There was another car behind him, one I didn't recognize. Who's with him? I asked. Olivia glanced out the window and her face went white. I don't know. He didn't mention bringing anyone else. 2 men in expensive suits were getting out of the second car. They moved with the professional confidence of people accustomed to difficult situations. Lawyers, probably, or worse. Doctors with commitment papers. Eleanor's voice echoed in my memory. When he gets desperate, he'll try to have you declared incompetent. It's the fastest way to gain control of the trust. Don't let him corner you alone. Olivia, I need you to do something for me. Dad, you're scaring me. Call Cartwright, my lawyer. His number is on the refrigerator. Tell him Victor is here with what looks like legal representation, and I may need immediate assistance. I'm not calling anyone until you talk to Victor. Maybe these men can help. They're not here to help me, sweetheart. They're here to help Victor. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by sharp knocking. Victor wasn't waiting for an invitation. Dad, please just listen to what they have to say. I looked at my daughter's face, seeing the genuine love and concern there, but also seeing how thoroughly Victor had manipulated her emotions. She honestly believed she was saving me from myself. All right, I said quietly. I'll listen. But Olivia, I want you to remember something. Your mother spent 42 years learning to trust my judgment. Maybe you should too. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see 3 figures waiting on my porch. Eleanor's final battle was about to begin, and I was no longer sure I was strong enough to fight it alone. I opened the door to find Victor flanked by two men who radiated the kind of expensive competence that made my skin crawl. The taller one carried a leather briefcase, while the shorter man held what looked like medical forms. Edward Chess, Victor said, his voice carrying a tone of forced concern. Thank you for agreeing to see us. This is Dr. Kessler, a geriatric psychiatrist, and Mr. Langley, a legal specialist in elder care. They pushed past me into my own home without waiting for an invitation. Olivia stood in the hallway, wringing her hands, clearly uncomfortable, but not willing to challenge her husband. I don't recall agreeing to see anyone except you, Victor, I said, closing the door with deliberate calm. Dr. Kessler was already studying me with clinical detachment. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of confident bearing that came from never being questioned about his authority. Mr. Beaumont, he said, your family has expressed some concerns about your mental state following your recent loss. These evaluations are quite routine in cases of sudden financial responsibility. Routine for whom Victor stepped forward, his hand settling on my shoulder in a gesture that would look supportive to an outsider but felt controlling to me. Edward, we're all here because we care about you. Dr. Kessler just wants to ask a few questions. Make sure you're processing your grief in a healthy way. And Mr. Langley, the lawyer, cleared his throat. I specialize in cases where elderly individuals may need assistance managing their affairs. Nothing invasive, just a review of your current mental capacity to handle complex financial decisions. They had it all planned out. A psychiatric evaluation to establish mental incompetence followed by legal action to transfer control of the trust. Eleanor had warned me this would happen, but experiencing it felt surreal. I see. And if I refuse to participate in this ambush, Dad, Olivia said, her voice breaking, please don't make this harder than it has to be. We're trying to help you, Doctor. Kessler was already pulling forms from his briefcase. Mr. Beaumont, I understand this feels intrusive, but your family has genuine concerns. Let's start with some basic cognitive assessments. Can you tell me what year it is? The condescension in his voice made my jaw clench. 2023. It's October 15th, a Thursday. My wife died 3 weeks and 2 days ago from complications related to her heart condition. I had coffee this morning at 7:30. I've been working in the garden, and I can recite the Gettysburg Address if you'd like to test my memory. Victor frowned. Edward, there's no need to be defensive. Dr. Kessler is just doing his job. His job is to evaluate patients who seek his help. I didn't seek his help. Mr. Langley stepped forward, consulting his tablet. Mr. Beaumont, according to your family, you've been exhibiting signs of confusion, memory loss, and poor judgment regarding financial matters. These are serious concerns that could put your estate at risk, according to my family, or according to Victor. Olivia's face flushed. Dad, I told them about your behavior at lunch. How confused you seemed about basic investment concepts. I wasn't confused, Olivia. I was being careful. Dr. Kessler looked up from his forms. Mr. Beaumont, paranoia and suspicion of family members can be early indicators of cognitive decline. Your resistance to help could actually support your family's concerns. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. If I cooperated, they'd find ways to declare me incompetent. If I resisted, my resistance itself would be evidence of mental illness. Eleanor had warned me about this too. Dr. Kessler, I said quietly, before we continue, I have a question for you. Who's paying for your services today? He blinked. I'm sorry. It's a simple question. Who hired you? Who's covering your fee? Victor jumped in. That's not relevant, Edward. The important thing is getting you the help you need. Actually, it's very relevant. I turned to Langley. And you, Mr. Langley, who retained your services. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. I was contacted by Mr. Victor to discuss options for elderly family members who might need assistance with. So Victor hired both of you. My son-in-law, who stands to gain control of $69 million if I'm declared incompetent, hired a psychiatrist and a lawyer to evaluate my mental state. Does anyone else see a conflict of interest here? Olivia looked between Victor and me, confusion clear on her face. Victor, you didn't tell me you hired them. Sweetheart, I was just being proactive. I wanted to have professional opinions available. If what? I interrupted. If I continue to refuse to sign over control of my wife's money to you? Dr. Kessler cleared his throat. Mr. Beaumont, I understand you're feeling defensive, but these accusations against your family members could indicate paranoid ideation. Paranoid ideation? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you about paranoid ideation, doctor. 3 years ago, my wife hired a private investigator because she suspected our son-in-law was planning to steal our money. Would you like to see the evidence she collected? The room went silent. Victor had gone very still, his face pale. Dad, Olivia whispered, what are you talking about? I excused myself and retrieved Eleanor's files from the study. When I returned, I spread the documents across the coffee table like Eleanor had taught me. Bank records, recorded conversations, legal consultations, medical inquiries. 3 years of systematic preparation for this exact moment. This, I said, pointing to a bank statement, shows Victor researching our financial accounts without permission. This recording captures him telling his business partner that he expects to inherit everything when the old man kicks the bucket. And this I held up a legal consultation request shows him meeting with a probate attorney to discuss challenging our will on grounds of mental incompetence. Dr. Kessler leaned forward to examine the documents. Mr. Beaumont, where did you obtain these materials? My wife left them for me. She spent her final months protecting me from the son-in-law who was planning to rob us blind. Victor found his voice. This is insane, Edward. Eleanor was sick paranoid, probably suffering from medication side effects. Like the medication side effects you mentioned to Dr. Morrow when you asked about having me committed. I pulled out another document, a consultation request Victor had made with a different psychiatrist 6 months ago, asking about the process for having elderly family members declared mentally incompetent. Olivia sank into a chair staring at the papers. Victor, what is all this? Victor was scrambling now, his composure completely shattered. Olivia, you have to understand. I was just exploring options in case Edward needed help. These documents are being taken out of context. Context. I picked up a transcript of a recorded phone call. Let me give you some context. This is you telling your friend Tom that you're tired of waiting for the old fool to die and that you're going to speed up the process by having me declared incompetent. Langley was quietly packing his briefcase. I think there may be some misunderstanding here. I wasn't made aware of any previous legal consultations. That's because Victor was shopping for professionals who would give him the answers he wanted. When Dr. Morrow refused to help him, he found Dr. Kessler. When his first lawyer had ethical concerns, he found you. Dr. Kessler stood up, his professional demeanor cracking. Mr. Beaumont, I was told you were exhibiting clear signs of dementia. If these allegations are true, then this evaluation was conducted under false pretenses. The only thing false here is my son-in-law's concern for my well-being. Olivia was crying now, but they weren't tears of sympathy for me. They were tears of betrayal as she finally saw her husband clearly. Victor, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't plan this. Victor made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Olivia, your father is having some kind of breakdown. These documents could be fabricated. His grief is making him paranoid. The documents are real, I said quietly. But more importantly, they're just the beginning. I pulled out the final folder, the one Eleanor had labeled nuclear option. Inside were copies of Victor communications with a divorce attorney discussing how to protect his assets in case his marriage to Olivia didn't provide the financial access he expected. This I said, handing the papers to my daughter. Is your husband consulting with a divorce lawyer about how to leave you while keeping control of our family's money? Olivia read the documents with growing horror. The consultation notes were brutal in their honesty. Victor had described her as useful but not essential, and had inquired about prenuptial agreement loopholes that might give him claim to inherited wealth. You were planning to divorce me. Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. Victor reached for her, but she pulled away. Olivia, that was just a consultation. I wanted to understand my legal rights. Your legal rights to leave me and steal my family's money. Dr. Kessler and Langley were edging toward the door, clearly wanting to escape what had become a family catastrophe. I didn't blame them. They'd been hired to participate in what they thought was a legitimate evaluation, only to discover they were accessories to attempted fraud. Gentlemen, I said, I think your services are no longer needed. Dr. Tieke Dutz. Kessler, you might want to reconsider your client screening process. Mr. Langley, I'd suggest reviewing the ethics guidelines regarding elder abuse. They left quickly, leaving Victor alone to face the wreckage of his plans. Edward, he said, his voice taking on a pleading quality I'd never heard before. We can work this out. Maybe I got a little aggressive, but it was only because I care about this family's future. No, Victor, you care about your future. There's a difference. Olivia stood up slowly, wiping her eyes. I need you to leave, Victor. Olivia, please leave now before I call the police. Victor looked between us, probably calculating whether there was any way to salvage the situation. But Eleanor had been thorough. Every manipulation tactic he might use had been predicted and countered. You'll regret this, he said finally. Both of you. You have no idea what you're throwing away. We're throwing away a liar and a thief, Olivia said. I think we'll manage. After Victor left, Olivia and I sat in the silence of our living room, surrounded by the evidence of her husband's betrayal. I wanted to comfort her, but I also knew she needed time to process what had just happened. I'm sorry, Dad, she said finally. I should have trusted you. I should have seen what he was doing. You loved him. That's not something to apologize for. But I chose him over you. I believed his lies about you being sick, about needing help. You were protecting someone you cared about. That shows character, not weakness. She looked at the scattered documents, shaking her head. Mom knew all along, didn't she? Your mother was very wise about people. She wanted to protect both of us. What happens now? I gathered Eleanor's files, feeling the weight of her final gift to our family. Now we honor her wishes. We protect what she built, and we make sure Victor never gets the chance to hurt anyone else. For the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt like myself again. Not the confused, grieving widower hour Victor had tried to create, but the man my wife had loved and trusted for 42 years. The battle was over, but the real work of healing was just beginning. 6 months later, I was sitting in Eleanor's garden, watching my granddaughter chase butterflies among the roses my wife had planted 20 years ago. The flowers were thriving better than they had in years, actually. Funny how things can flourish when you remove the toxic elements that were slowly poisoning them. Olivia filed for divorce 3 weeks after the confrontation with Victor. The proceedings were swift and decisive, especially once Victor's own lawyers reviewed the evidence Eleanor had collected, faced with proof of his attempted financial manipulation and marital fraud. Victor agreed to a settlement that left him with nothing but his personal belongings and a reputation that preceded him wherever he went. He tried to fight it at first, of course. There was a brief period where he attempted to claim that Eleanor's documents were somehow fabricated, that I had manipulated Olivia against him. But Cartwright had been thorough in documenting everything, and the timeline of Eleanor's investigation made Victor's claims laughable. The private investigator my wife had hired testified about the evidence he'd gathered. Dr. Morrow, the first psychiatrist Victor had approached, provided testimony about Victor's initial attempt to have me declared incompetent. Even some of Victor's former business associates came forward with stories about his boastful predictions regarding our family's wealth. In the end, Victor simply disappeared. Olivia heard through mutual friends that he'd moved to another state, started using his middle name professionally, and was working as a mid-level financial advisor for a firm that probably didn't know about his history. I didn't feel vindicated by his downfall, just relieved that he was no longer in our lives. Grandpa Edward, look. Lily, Olivia's 4-year-old daughter, came running toward me with a butterfly perched delicately on her finger. She likes me. I smiled, remembering how Eleanor used to say that butterflies were drawn to pure hearts. She certainly does. What are you going to name her, Eleanor? Lily said without hesitation, like Grandma Eleanor who made the pretty flowers. My throat tightened with emotion. Olivia had been careful to keep Eleanor's memory alive, for Lily telling her stories about the grandmother she'd barely known. It was one of the many ways my daughter had worked to rebuild our relationship after the trauma of discovering Victor's true nature. Olivia emerged from the house carrying a tray with lemonade and sandwiches. At 32, she looked younger now than she had during her marriage to Victor. The constant stress of living with a manipulative partner had taken its toll in ways none of us had fully understood at the time. "Dad, you've been out here for hours," she said, setting the tray on the little table Eleanor had used for her morning coffee. "Are you feeling all right?" It was a question she asked regularly now, but not with the suspicious concern that Victor had planted in her mind. This was the genuine worry of a daughter who had almost lost her father to a predator scheme. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just enjoying the peace." And I was peaceful in a way I hadn't been since Eleanor's diagnosis 2 years ago. The trust fund was performing better than ever under my management, not because I'd suddenly become a financial genius, but because I'd followed Eleanor's instructions about which advisors to trust and which investment strategies aligned with our family's values. Cartwright had introduced me to a financial advisor named Rebecca Norton, a woman in her 50s who specialized in managing inherited wealth for families who wanted to preserve their money rather than chase aggressive returns. Rebecca had reviewed Eleanor's portfolio and pronounced it brilliantly conservative, structured to grow steadily while protecting against the kind of risky speculation that appealed to people like Victor. "Your wife understood something that many wealthy people never learn," Rebecca had told me during our first meeting. "Money isn't about having the highest returns or the most impressive portfolio. It's about having the security to live according to your values." Eleanor's values. They were my values too, though I'd never articulated them as clearly as she had. Family before profit, security before speculation, wisdom before cleverness. Lily had released her butterfly and was now helping Olivia arrange flowers in a vase, white roses mixed with the purple phlox that grew wild along our back fence. They worked together with the easy companionship that only came from spending real time together. Something that had been impossible when Victor dominated every family gathering with his need to be the center of attention. "Dad," Olivia said, looking up from the flowers, "I wanted to talk to you about something. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about going back to school, getting my master's degree in social work." This was new. During her marriage to Victor, Olivia had worked part-time as an administrative assistant, but Victor had discouraged her from pursuing higher education. He'd claimed it was unnecessary, that his income was sufficient for their family's needs. Looking back, I realized he'd been systematically isolating her from opportunities that might have given her independence. "That sounds wonderful. What kind of social work interests you?" "Elder care advocacy. Helping families navigate situations like," she gestured vaguely, encompassing everything we'd been through. "I keep thinking about how many other people might be dealing with financial abuse or manipulation. People who don't have the resources we had to fight back." My chest swelled with pride. This was Eleanor's daughter, not just biologically, but spiritually. She had inherited her mother's instinct to protect vulnerable people. "I think your mother would be very proud of that choice. Would you help me with tuition? I know the trust fund is for family needs, and I want to make sure this qualifies." I laughed. "Olivia, educating my daughter so she can help other families is exactly the kind of thing your mother would have insisted we fund. Of course I'll help you." Lily had wandered over to the bird bath and was trying to coax a robin to drink from her cupped hands. She had Eleanor's patience with small creatures, the same gentle persistence that had made my wife so good with people. "There's something else," Olivia said, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty. "I've been thinking about dating again. Nothing serious, just getting back out there. But I wanted to make sure you were okay with it." The question surprised me. Why wouldn't I be okay with it? Because of what happened with Victor. Because I made such a terrible mistake in judgment. What if I do it again? I sat down my lemonade and really looked at my daughter. She was asking for permission to trust herself again, seeking reassurance that one mistake didn't define her ability to choose a partner. "Olivia, you were 23 when you met Victor. You'd never encountered anyone who was deliberately trying to deceive you. That doesn't make you naive. It makes you human. But what if I missed the warning signs again?" "You won't. How can you be so sure?" I gestured toward the garden around us, toward Lily, playing contentedly in the grass, toward the peaceful afternoon we were sharing. "Because you've seen what real happiness looks like now. You know the difference between someone who adds to your life and someone who tries to control it. She was quiet for a moment, watching Lily chase a soap bubble that had drifted over from the neighbor's yard. I miss her dad. Mom, I miss having someone to talk to about these things. I miss her too. But you know what she'd tell you right now? What she'd tell you? That the best way to honor her memory is to live fully, to take risks when they're worth taking to love, when you find someone worthy of love, and to trust your own judgment, because you're stronger and wiser than you give yourself credit for. Lily came running back to us, breathless and glowing with the simple joy of a perfect afternoon. Grandpa Edward, will you push me on the swing? Of course, sweetheart. As I stood up, Olivia caught my hand. Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been angry at Mom for not telling me about Victor sooner, for investigating him instead of just talking to me. This was something we'd both struggled with. Eleanor's decision to gather evidence instead of confronting Victor directly had probably saved our family's fortune, but it had also meant that Olivia lived with a lie for years. She was protecting you the only way she knew how. I said, I know that now, but at the time it felt like she didn't trust me to handle the truth. Maybe she was also protecting herself. If she'd confronted Victor directly and you'd chosen him over her, it would have broken her heart. Olivia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I would have chosen him. At the time, I would have believed his lies over her evidence. That's what scares me the most. But you didn't have to make that choice. She made sure of that. Lily was tugging on my sleeve, impatient for her swing ride. I let her pull me toward the old oak tree where I'd hung a rope swing when Olivia was her age. Eleanor used to sit on the garden bench and watch our daughter soar back and forth, her laughter echoing across the yard. As I pushed Lily higher and higher, listening to her delighted squeals, I thought about the letter Eleanor had left me. Not the strategic documents about Victor, but the personal note I'd found last week tucked inside her favorite cookbook. Edward, she'd written, if you're reading this, then you've successfully protected our family from Victor Greed. I'm proud of you, though. I wish I could have seen you in action. You always underestimated your own strength. But this isn't the end of your story, my love. It's the beginning of a new chapter. You have years ahead of you, good years, I hope. And I want you to fill them with joy, not just duty. Take care of Olivia and Lily, but don't forget to take care of yourself. Travel to those places we always talked about visiting. Read those books you never had time for. Make new friends. Maybe even find new love if your heart is open to it. I know that last suggestion might shock you, but I mean it. I loved you for 42 years. Edward and I want that love to keep expanding, not contracting. The best way to honor what we had is to remain open to what you might still have. All my love, always, Eleanor P.S. The combination to my jewelry box is our first anniversary, not our wedding day. Lily might enjoy the pearls someday. I'd cried when I read that letter, but they were tears of gratitude, not grief. Eleanor had given me one final gift: permission to be happy. Higher, Grandpa. Higher. I pushed Lily's swing with renewed energy, watching her reach toward the sky with fearless joy. In the distance, Olivia was arranging the last of the flowers, humming a song I recognized. Something Eleanor used to sing while she worked in this same garden. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Soon Olivia and Lily would head home to their small apartment across town, and I'd return to my quiet house with its familiar routines and memories. But the solitude no longer felt like punishment. It felt like possibility. Tomorrow, I would call the travel agent and book the trip to Ireland that Eleanor and I had always planned. Next week, I would join the community garden club that had been asking for volunteers. Next month, I would attend my first social event since the funeral, a fundraiser for the local library that Eleanor had always supported. I was 65 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I was accountable to no one but myself. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As Lily's swing began to slow, she looked back at me with Eleanor's eyes, bright, curious, full of trust in the goodness of the world. Will you always take care of me, Grandpa Edward? Always, I promised, meaning it completely. But you know what's even better? What you're going to learn to take care of yourself too. And someday you'll take care of people you love just like your grandmother did. Lily considered this seriously, as 4-year-olds do when presented with adult concepts they don't quite understand, but somehow recognize as important. Will I be brave like Grandma Eleanor? You already are, sweetheart. You already are. As the last light faded from the garden, I pushed my granddaughter on the swing her mother had once used, surrounded by roses that would bloom again next spring, in a place where love had triumphed over greed and wisdom had defeated cunning. Eleanor was gone, but her legacy lived on in every choice I made, every boundary I maintained, and every moment of peace I allowed myself to enjoy. And that I realized was exactly what she would have wanted. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen two other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.